Hello and welcome to everyone that is joining our webinar today. This is the webinar for the Entrepreneurship in Emerging Markets 2026 Global Case Writing Competition. This is the first webinar for this event, first informational webinar. So as we wait a few seconds for more people to join, I just want everyone to know they're in the right place. Please stand by. Okay, we're going to get started today. Again, hello and welcome to the first informational webinar for our case writing competition. Our webinar today will share some insights and tips on writing a good case study. And just so everyone is aware, this particular case writing competition is sponsored by the William Davidson Institute at the University of Michigan, as well as WDI Publishing, which is part of the William Davidson Institute. And it's also sponsored by the Zell-Lurie Institute for Entrepreneurship here at the University of Michigan. My name is Sandy Draheim, and I'm the manager of case publishing for WDI Publishing. And for those of you that might not be familiar with the William Davidson Institute, we are a global nonprofit organization that works with emerging markets, particularly where education, entrepreneurship, and impact intersect. We use the power of business and markets to drive inclusive economic growth. And our current sector focuses are on clean energy, e-mobility, climate health, and health. I will be one of your presenters today, along with Sarika Gupta, who is Managing Director of the Zell-Lurie Institute, and I'll further introduce her in a moment. But before we begin, just a bit of housekeeping. If you have a question today during any part of the presentation, please send your question within the Q&A function in Zoom, and that Q&A is located next to screen share in your control panel for Zoom. We will try to answer as many questions as possible, both during and after the presentation today. We'll also aim to keep this webinar to just 1 hour to be respectful of everyone's time. You probably noticed when you logged in today that this webinar is being recorded. The recording will be available or made available on the case writing competition website, as well as on the homepage of WDI Publishing. I'll also try to email a link to it to everyone that registered for the webinar today. This is our agenda for today. First, we'll learn a little bit more from Sarika about the Zell-Lurie Institute for Entrepreneurship. After that, I will do a brief overview of the competition itself, what it entails, some other information. And then I'll talk a little bit more about how to write a case, the sections of a case, and allow some Q&A after that. Once again, I just want to welcome everyone. We had registrants from over 43 countries for this webinar, so I'm really excited that so many people are interested, and I'm excited to get this webinar started. So with that, I'd like to introduce Sarika Gupta, who is the Managing Director of the Zell-Lurie Institute for Entrepreneurship here at the University of Michigan. She is also a lecturer of business administration at the Ross School of Business. She's also experienced as a startup founder, manager, and mentor. So I'll turn it over to Sarika right now.
Great. Thank you, Sandy. All right. Hi, everyone. We're so glad you're here and grateful for your interest in this case competition and generally in entrepreneurship in emerging markets. I want to briefly introduce the Zell-Lurie Institute. So we are the University of Michigan's hub for entrepreneurship and venture capital. we help Michigan students and alumni start, invest in, and lead ventures that we believe make a real world impact. We believe very strongly that an entrepreneurial mindset can be learned and that it is critical for success regardless of the career path you choose. And our programs, mentors, and funding opportunities give our Wolverines the tools and support to really transform their ideas into action. You'll see on this slide a quick snapshot of our impact so far. So we've been around for 25 years, and over those 25 years, our entrepreneurs have raised over $3 billion for their companies. We've supported more than 11,000 students. We now have 5 student-led funds that we support with $15 million under management, and over our 25 years have awarded over 12 million directly to students. And we are also proud to continuously be ranked as a top 5 school for entrepreneurship globally. While we think these metrics are impressive, what we really, really care about is how our students and alumni think and lead. And everything we do is really grounded in helping our students and alumni develop an entrepreneurial mindset. And for us, what that means is being curious, like asking better questions, constantly seeking new knowledge, being creative, meaning generating ideas and approaching problems in new and different ways, collaboration, knowing the best outcomes happen when people work together, being adaptable. We know that's very important in entrepreneurship. So being able to pivot when conditions change, which we know always happens, being resilient, learning from failure, and being a self-starter, of course. So taking initiative, owning your outcomes, even when the path ahead isn't that clear. So we believe these are skills that allow entrepreneurs to thrive. And they're just as essential in any career path you choose, whether it's in corporate, consulting, investing, and of course, social impact work as well. So that just a quick introduction, but this is all why we're very excited to partner with WDI on this case competition. We think this collaboration brings together our strength in entrepreneurial education, and that combined with WDI's deep expertise in both entrepreneurship and emerging markets. We believe we're giving the participants the chance to engage with real world challenges, work alongside faculty, develop cases that reflect the complexity and opportunity of entrepreneurship across global contexts. So we're really excited to be partnering with WDI on this. Very excited to have you all here, and thank you for joining, and I will pass things back to Sandy.
Thank you, Sarika, for that and for your time today. It's just great that you've been able to be with us. If you have any specific questions for Sarika, please again enter it in the Q&A function of Zoom. But right now, I would like to move into a brief overview of the competition for everyone. Let's start with the goals of actually having the competition in the first place. First, we would like to encourage and reward the development and publication of new relevant academic case studies that focus on entrepreneurship in developing countries. Second, we'd like to publish teaching materials that will increase student understanding of the unique challenges of creating, implementing, and sustaining an entrepreneurial venture in or focused toward an emerging market. And finally, we want to accelerate learning opportunities for students that encourage the development of that critical thinking that's needed for entrepreneurs to have success in emerging markets. By this time, I'm sure everyone understands what the topic of your case needs to be, but I'll talk about that a little bit. It must be about an entrepreneurial venture in an emerging market. So it should feature a protagonist that has to solve a dilemma that highlights an example of an entrepreneurial venture related to one or more emerging markets. The dilemma could be about many kinds of different things. It could be about social or inclusive entrepreneurship, technology and innovation challenges in a resource-constrained environment, which often is the case in an emerging market. It could be about globalization or expansion. Could be even about sustainability, climate, entrepreneurial ventures focused on that in emerging markets, or just plain education and skills, ecosystem development in an emerging market. And these are just a few things you might want to consider as the topic of your case. I really encourage everyone to visit the submissions requirements page on our website for the competition, as it gives more information about the topic of your case. The company or organization that you feature in your case study does not have to be geographically located in an emerging market, but it does have to be facing a dilemma or that is directly related to an emerging market. A little bit more definition on who can enter this competition. University faculty can enter either individually or in teams. Graduate or undergraduate students can also enter individually or in teams, as long as they enter in collaboration with a university faculty member. Other professionals and practitioners may also enter, but we also suggest that they too enter in collaboration with a university faculty member. The reason we're suggesting this collaboration with a faculty member is to ensure that the submitted documents have academic rigor as well as strong pedagogy. The prize awards for the competition are listed here. First prize is $5,000 US, second is $3,000, and third place is $1,000. Again, all in US currency. Additionally, all of the winning cases will be published by WDI Publishing, and we'll go through our publishing process once they're announced as a winner. We may also award honorable mentions, and honorable mentions will not receive any monetary award, but they'll still be published by WDI Publishing. And that's all pending agreement with the authors of those cases. Whenever I enter a competition, I always like to know, well, how are you going to make your decision on the winners? So I thought it would be helpful to review the judging criteria with you here very quickly. First, the topic or content which obviously has to be entrepreneurship in an emerging market. We've talked about that. Another criteria you'll be judged on is the teaching and learning value of the case. It has to be engaging for students. It has to really put them in a position to solve and analyze and apply critical thinking to solve a problem. The introduction and overview of the case, I'll talk more about this later, but the intro and overview must really be compelling and spark interest. It must talk about the protagonist, the featured organization, and the dilemma right up front. Another criteria is the protagonist and the organization that you're writing about. They just have to be clarified within the first part of the case. So the protagonist and the organization just need to be clearly identified in the first part of the case study. The dilemma. So the dilemma in your case must not only be clearly defined, but it has to be able to be realistically solved by the protagonist. So that means that the dilemma can have applicability beyond just the immediate situation in the case. And the case should actually provide a couple of specific questions that represent the dilemma to be solved. The next criteria is the writing itself, along with any citations or endnote sources. This is important because with a case study, we need to cite any data or quotes that we use in the case. You can use a wide variety of sources for background information. We just ask that all of that be sourced accordingly. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then finally, every case submitted must include a teaching note. And the teaching note is a document that's directed at instructors, not directed at students. So what the teaching note does is really explains to the instructor the purpose of the case, the teaching objectives, the learning objectives for the case, and some additional information. Again, I can talk about that more a little bit later. I'd like to mention that we have some really excellent finalist judges for our competition. What will happen is out of all the submissions we receive, we will have a couple of rounds at least of initial reviews that will narrow down the finalists to probably around 10 to 12 cases, depending on how many submissions we receive. And the finalist judges here will be the people that rank the finalist cases so that we can determine the first, second, and third place winners and possibly any honorable mentions. So I'll quickly tell you who the finalist judges are. First, we have Rose Dodd, who is Executive Director of the Education Collaborative at Ashishi University in Ghana. The Education Collaborative is a Pan-African initiative launched by that university in 2017, and Rose leads a peer-driven network that has over 400 institutions across the African continent. Our next judge is Grace Shia Haberl. She is CEO and co-founder of Warmaloo, which is a non-electric infant warming incubator manufacturing company. She is also a lecturer and programs co-lead at the Center for Entrepreneurship at the University of Michigan's College of Engineering. Our next finalist judge is Gautam Kaul. He is professor of finance at the University of Michigan's Ross Business School. He's taught at the undergraduate, MBA, global MBA, executive MBA, and other levels, and is founding managing director of 3 programs created in partnership with some graduate students. One is the Social Venture Fund, the other one is the International Investment Fund, and the third is the Michigan Climate Venture Fund. Our next judge is Ruth Karaka. She is Associate Professor of Management at Strathmore University in Kenya. She currently chairs the Entrepreneurship and Innovation Hub at Strathmore. And she's been involved as a lead researcher on projects about gender equality, women's economic empowerment, and the development of pastoral markets in Kenya. Our next finalist judge is John Lofkus. He's a senior editor at Harvard Business Publishing, which is now Harvard Business Impact. He's a senior editor for cases and pedagogy at Harvard, and he's co-authored several cases and was formerly an instructor at the Wharton School. Our next finalist judge is Chukwuemeka Chekeki. I hope I pronounced that right. He is Senior Programs Coordinator with LEAP Africa in Nigeria. He leads entrepreneurship and social innovation portfolios, including the Social Innovators Program and awards. Next on our finalist judge list is Dr. Nneka Okikearu. She is Director, Enterprise Development Center at the Pan Atlantic University in Nigeria. She leads initiatives that strengthen entrepreneurship education, expand market access for small businesses, and advance women's economic empowerment across Africa. So these are our finalist judges, and we feel so lucky to have secured them to review our finalist cases. A little note about the review and judging process. The first and second rounds of reviews will be double blind. That is, the reviewers will not know the identity of the submitting authors and vice versa. However, the finalist judges will also not know the identity of the submitting authors, but of course, all of the authors and submitters will know the identity of the finalist judges because I I just mentioned them, as well as they're listed on our competition website. There are several submission requirements, and I recommend you go to the competition website to review these very carefully, but I'm going to mention a few here. Um, First, please make sure your topic is in alignment with the requirement about entrepreneurship in emerging markets. Please make sure you include a teaching note, and as I said, I'll talk about that more in a few moments. Make sure you have a developed protagonist and dilemma or decision point. Please make sure whatever you submit has not been published anywhere previously. We want to avoid any challenges with copyright, it having been published elsewhere. So please make sure it has not been published previously. And we would ask attention to citations and endnote sources. Just make sure those are complete for any data within your case, as I've mentioned previously. Again, listed on this slide is the link to our resources page for the competition. I just encourage you to go there to review all of what's there because I think it could be helpful. Finally, some key dates for the competition. Our next webinar is actually January 21st, 2026. And the focus of that webinar will be about how to write a teaching note. On January 30th, we're asking that intent to enter forms are submitted through our website. It's important to understand that this intent to enter form can be filled out and submitted at the link that is listed on our website. But this form, the intent to enter form, asks for some high-level information about the case you intend to submit. But please note that your final documents do not have to be ready by January 30th. It's just this form. The information we request on this intent to enter form gives the competition administrators the opportunity to evaluate and assist you, if necessary, with certain elements of your submission. So it's really to help you at a milestone along the way as you're writing your case. So your final submissions are not due until April 13th, 2026, and then we'll formally announce the winners in September of 2026. Again, please be sure to visit our resources page, which is listed again on this slide. So we're at the point in our presentation where I'd like to dig a little bit deeper into how to write a case study. And I like to start these presentations often with the first Harvard case study, which you see on your screen here. Yes, it's just one page long, which is not the general case these days. They're much longer. But this case was published in 1921, and it was about a company called the General Shoe Company. Cases today often reflect much more complexity than this and are typically much longer in length. But in today's cases also reflect the challenges of a global economy and global competitions. But having said all of that, this case does include all the key parts of a case study: the description of the problem, the protagonist, the background information, and what the dilemma is, what needs to be solved. So I'd like to provide a definition of what a case study is and is not. What a case study is for business schools is a story-based teaching tool. It's a story or a narrative about a decision faced by an organization. Even though there's a decision and a dilemma point, there should never be just one right answer to that decision or dilemma point. And you should never divulge what the answer is within the case, because that's the purpose of the case, to have the student solve that problem. A case must also have a protagonist that makes that decision or that's responsible for making that decision. And it should also have a defined time frame and urgency or tension surrounding the decision. For example, if a director at a company must issue a public statement and a proposal for how the company will avoid a problem in the future, what is the deadline for that decision? When did she find out about the crisis? Our lives at stake, our jobs at stake, are the general public's homes at stake? It can be a wide range of problems that might result based on this dilemma or decision. This slide reminds us what a business case study is not. It is not just a summary of events, and it's also not a news article. It is not a research paper, should not be written like a research paper, although it will still have citations and sources documented. And sometimes it's important to remember it's not a marketing tool for whatever organization you're writing about. The fact that it's a case study and that it has a dilemma point means that there's probably going to be something in this organization that's a problem for that organization, but that's okay because that's the purpose of a case study, to learn from someone's challenge and hopefully to learn from a real organization's actual challenge. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this slide, which talks about a case study's structure. So the first section of a case to think about is really the title of the case. And you may think about this, but actually not create the title till after you've written the case. But a few key things about the title of the case. The title of the case should include the name of the organization you're writing about and allude to the dilemma in the case. We recommend it be about 10 to 12 words long, and we caution against titles that are too long, because those kinds of titles are not good in online search results or online displays, because often they're truncated and shortened, which sometimes means that long titles don't make sense because only a few words of the title will show. The next section of a case is the introduction. The introduction can be about 1/2 to maybe even 2 pages long. It really depends. Either way is okay. It presents the protagonist by name. It explains what the organization is and who the organization is that's being written about. The introduction also introduces the dilemma and clarifies the time frame of the case. The introduction should be written in a narrative style that draws the reader in by describing the tension and the urgency of the situation. Next is what I call the background information in the case. This will be the largest section within your case and will probably be subdivided by subheads. I call this background because after you've introduced what the dilemma and the situation is, you're going to provide relevant facts, including things like company history, organization history, number of employees, locations of the organization, what are the products or services of that organization. Many, many times financial information is included about the organization, information about competitors, information about what's happened within the industry, if that's relevant to your case dilemma. Also, more background about the protagonist. How did they get into this position? How did they come to have to solve this dilemma? What are their reporting responsibilities? Do people report to the protagonist? Who does the protagonist report to? Sometimes that's important because students need to put themselves into the shoes of the protagonist. So the more they feel like they can do that from the case description, the better. Next is the conclusion of the case, and the conclusion is very, very important. The conclusion should restate the dilemma, and the time frame and the urgency should also restate who the protagonist is and restate the tensions and the urgency surrounding the decision. So you kind of circle back to many of the same things you talked about in the introduction. This sets the stage for the students who are studying the case to come up with answers to the dilemma. There are other parts of a case, and I've listed those at the bottom of this table. The visuals in a case can take many forms: exhibits, tables, figures, appendices. Just remember that each graphic, each table you include must be sourced. There must be a source line that falls beneath the graphic. We need to know where the data or the information in the graphic came from. If you create a graphic yourself, that's perfectly fine, but still be sure to indicate where the graphic came from. You can say created by the author, using data from, and then list where the data came from. Citations and endnotes are a big part of any case. Citations in our case studies are consecutively numbered Roman numerals. I'm sorry, citations are consecutive superscript numbers that appear within your text, usually at the end of the text for which you are referencing a source. I'm going to show you an example of this in the next slide or two. Endnotes fall at the end of the document, end of the case, and they reflect the full source information. Usually that includes name of the publication, the author, the date it was published, and the URL, the online source where it can be accessed. We also like to include the date you access the source, because with online sources, they change very, very frequently. So a specific online URL may not be available by the time the case is published, for example, but we still want to attribute the source. Footnotes are consecutively numbered Roman numerals in our cases, and they're positioned at the bottom of the page where the text is referenced. Just keep in mind that footnotes and endnotes are not the same. What will help you is referencing the WDA publishing document, How to Write a Case, and you can access that document on the resources page on the competition website. Of course, there are common challenges in any exercise, including in case writing, and I've recorded a few of the common challenges so you can be on the lookout for them as you're writing your case. The first challenge is the importance of the first few paragraphs of the case. I'm repeating myself a little bit within this presentation, but that's because I want to make sure that everything is clear. So the protagonist is often part of the challenge. We have to identify the protagonist really early in the case, inclusive of their title, position, responsibilities, and background. The protagonist should ideally be one person instead of a team or a group of people. And the protagonist generally is someone with higher level decision-making capability or responsibility in the organization. Also, a challenge sometimes is the dilemma itself or the decision point. Sometimes it's just unclear to the reader. It's important to clearly describe what the dilemma encompasses so that students reading the case know exactly what questions to answer and what recommendations to make. Also, in the first few paragraphs of the case, the time frame is very important. Make sure you identify it, and then be sure to stick with that time frame with all the other information you put forth in the case. For example, if you're writing about something that occurred at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, say in 2020, then you can't share data in the case from anything outside that time frame. For example, if the time frame of your case is 2020, you can't share information in the case that would have been from 2021 or 2022. So that's what I mean by keeping to a specified time frame, and also by identifying it so the reader's clear when all of this is taking place. And then another common challenge is as I mentioned before, the final paragraphs. Again, just make sure you circle back to the dilemmas questions as well as the challenges facing the protagonist, the urgency. The last paragraph should, in essence, wrap up and conclude the case and the outstanding questions to be answered. Incomplete citations and endnotes are also a challenge. Data and information in the case must be cited within the text with a citation with a complete endnote source. And again, any visuals in the case must also include sources. If you look at this slide, you'll see an example of a random paragraph from a case study. You can read this at your leisure. I'm not going to read it to you, but you will see that there is a red arrow where the superscript citation number is located. And it's located right at the end of this paragraph because that is the source for that entire paragraph. So if we think about the last slide we just saw, at the end of the case, this is what the endnote source would look like. That corresponds to that same citation number, number 1. You'll see that this source says or includes the author, the title of the article, the publisher, which is the New York Times, the date of its publication, the link to the actual article, and the date it was accessed by the author to include in this case. If you're unfamiliar when you're in Microsoft Word writing your case, if you're unfamiliar with how to automate the whole citations and endnotes functionality, this link could be very helpful. And to locate this in Microsoft Word, you'll look where the red arrow is pointing here on the references panel. And again, if you're unfamiliar how to make this happen automatically, please go to this link. It's very helpful. Okay, I'm going to pause briefly here because I think we have some questions that have come up. And if you'll bear with me 1 second, I will let me answer one of these questions. The question is, what is the maximum number of students and faculty being in a team to compete together? We don't have a maximum number. I mean, we're not putting a cap on the total number of people that can be on a team. I can tell you, though, that if you have more than 4 people on a writing team, it can be a little bit cumbersome just trying to coordinate that many people into an authorship framework. So I would say the average number of people in a team at maximum would be about 4. I hope that answers your question. Does the faculty member need to be from the University of Michigan? I think this question is referring to if you have to collaborate with faculty. No is the answer. The faculty that is collaborated with can be from any college or university globally. I have a question that came up about the definition of an emerging market, and that's a very good question because sometimes that changes over the course of a few years. But I have a link, or we have a link on the case competition website. I believe it's on the home page. So if you go to the website for the competition, it will provide a link where you can check whether a market is considered an emerging market. Sometimes they'll call it a low income or low and middle income market. So the nomenclature for that changes sometimes. So I believe I used a World Bank source to define that. Lots of questions about whether the slides will be shared from this presentation. Yes, they will. They'll be part of the recording. So yes, you will be able to see the slides, though they will not be provided as PowerPoint slides. They'll just be part of the recording. Can there be collaboration between faculty, student, and practitioner? Yes, that would be awesome. So absolutely that could happen. Another question about roughly how many people enter the competition. I can't answer that because this is the first time we've had a competition with this topic, but I can tell you for previous competitions that have been about other topics, there can be anywhere from 25 to 50 to 70 submissions, final submissions into the competition. But I'm unable to give you a specific answer about this competition because we haven't had it before. Just looking at more questions. This is a very good question. Is written consent needed from the owner of the organization or protagonist needed? Should they be included as authors? Let me take this one question at a time. If you're writing using what I call primary information about an organization, so let's say you know the owner of the organization or the president, and they are giving you firsthand information about the company that is not publicly available to anyone else, then yes, you need to get permission and actually a sign off on an organizational release of ours before that case could ever be published. Um, again, if you're using primary information, that's information that you're receiving directly from the organization that's not available anywhere else to the general public, you do need the organization's permission. And sometimes it's good to tell the organization that, hey, I'm entering this case into a competition and it may win. And if it wins, it's going to be published and available all over the world. It's good to tell the organization all of that information up front because they may not realize that it's not being written for just a small audience or just maybe one classroom session. It has the potential to be published globally. Another part of that question, should the organization be included as authors? They usually aren't, but I've had occasions where they are included as authors. So that's something we have to take, no pun intended, on a case-by-case basis. How do I obtain consent from firms that are larger in size and hence individual consent becomes difficult to obtain? Very good question. Larger companies, the larger the company, the more difficult it becomes to get consent or permission. So if you don't know someone in that larger company, it's quite possible you'll never get that permission. But that doesn't mean you can't write about an organization. You'll just have to use information that's publicly available. So I hope I answered that question adequately. Bear with me, I'm reading through the column here. Here's a question about the intent to enter form. After the intent to enter form submission, will we get feedback on whether the topic is appropriate? Yes, yes, you will, because that's one of the purposes of having this intent to enter form milestone. For practitioners who would like to enter the competition, can two people from different organizations form a team to, yes, two people from different organizations can collaborate together on a team. How should they choose a faculty collaborator? Do they have to be from WDI? Can they be from other universities? Yes, the faculty collaborator can be from any university globally. Is it mandatory to write about a real organization for the competition? It's not mandatory. You can write about a fictional organization or company. However, I can tell you that cases about real organizations are a lot more credible with students who are the final users of the case itself and seem to resonate more. Is there a word limit, page limit to the case study? There is not. There are no limitations to number of words, number of pages. However, our average case study length is about 10 to 15 pages, and that includes visuals like exhibits and tables. The average number of pages for a teaching note is between 8 to 10 to 12 pages, usually right around 10 pages. I hope that's helpful. This this is an excellent question. What is the key element that makes a case study good versus excellent? I would say a case study that is very relatable and can be engaged with on a graduate student level tends to be the most successful type of case studies. So what that means is the case study is about something very relevant to today's graduate students, whether that be social impact, social entrepreneurship. I think emerging markets and entrepreneurship in emerging markets is very relevant right now as the world becomes smaller and smaller and business happens in every single country and corner of the world right now. I'm giving you this answer of what makes a case the best because assuming that it's written correctly with good grammar and all the good elements of a case within it. I have a question about how does one typically go about gathering information and convincing a company to participate in a case study? I believe there's a link on the resources page to a document called FAQs for Featured Organizations in Case Studies. If you can't find it on the competition website, please contact me, info@wdipublishing.com, and I'll send you that document. This document gives you some tips for what's the responsibility of the featured organization in a case, what's the responsibility of the case writer, and why would a company want to be involved in an academic case. Can we use fictional names for entrepreneurs and companies? Should they be real? This is similar to a previous question. It's great if you could use the real names, but sometimes we need to use fictional names if someone won't give us permission to use real names. So it's okay if you have to use fictional names. That happens once in a while. Can I use available secondary data on an organization to write a case study without getting that company's permission? Yes. As long as you use publicly available secondary data, you do not have to get the company's permission. Okay, still looking. I love all these questions. All of them are excellent. Can you share your thoughts on the use of AI, artificial intelligence, in preparing the case study? I can just say a few things about AI. I'm not an AI expert, but I know that AI is insidious now. It's just everywhere. We all use it for something. It's advanced our world in many ways, but it's also become challenging, especially for publishers and the copyright community. So it's okay to use AI if you want to research something for your case, but if you're actually putting something in your case pulled directly from AI, you will need to point that out to us when you submit your case. You'll have to be very specific about what part of the case was generated using any kind of AI help. So I hope that helps you a little bit. Okay. I have only a few minutes left in the hour, so I'm going to go through my last slide here. This is the teaching note structure. Before I review this, which I'm going to do quickly, I want to remind you that the next webinar will be totally dedicated to writing a teaching note. And so if you miss something here, please make sure you sign up for the next webinar because we'll talk more about it. These are the major sections of a teaching note. Just remember the teaching note is written for the instructor or professor so that they can understand how to best teach the case. So the first section in a teaching note should be called the case overview. And this is an executive summary, basically, of the case, including the dilemma, protagonist, etc. Next in the teaching note should be a list of the learning objectives. And what learning objectives do is state what students should be able to do after analyzing and discussing the case. Should they be able to apply frameworks to entrepreneurship in emerging markets? Should they be able to give a presentation about the pros and cons of running a business, starting it in an emerging market? I'm just making this up, but these are examples of learning objectives for a case. Next is a pedagogy section, and this identifies the audience for the case, business disciplines for which the case is appropriate, any prerequisite materials necessary for studying the case, what kind of courses the case would be appropriate for, and then also the pedagogy section also includes sometimes a list of supplemental materials about the case topic that might be helpful for students and the instructor to read before studying the case. Next in the case are assignment questions, and these are the questions students must answer within their case analysis. The assignment questions do not have to be verbatim the stated dilemma in the case, but they certainly should relate to that dilemma. And that way students will be able to draw back and circle back to what they learned in the case in order to provide answers. The case analysis section then includes listing the assignment questions again, but under each assignment question, please list all possible answers that students might give to that assignment question. If the question is about what are the pros and cons of something, then you list what are the pros and cons of what that question is asking for. Next is the teaching plan. And this section indicates basically how an instructor should allocate time in class for discussing the different parts of a case. Often the teaching plan is expressed in the teaching note in a table, listing what part of the case discussion on one side, and then in the next column of the table will be listed how much time should be spent there, along with any other information that would be helpful to the instructor. And then the conclusion of the case should be the last section of a teaching note. This conclusion doesn't have to be long, maybe a paragraph, maybe two, provides additional clarity about the case and also key takeaways that students should reflect upon after discussing the case. So I know I've gone through the teaching note sections here very quickly, but again, our next webinar will talk more about how to write a teaching note. And I would like to see if there's other questions that have come in that I could quickly answer before we wrap up. By the way, if I haven't answered your question, feel free to email me, info@wdipublishing.com. I have a question about what about an accompanying video for a case? That's not a requirement. Our requirement is a written case and a written teaching note in Microsoft Word format when it's submitted. We don't require there to be any audiovisual materials that accompany the case unless you want there to be. Just make sure that's clear to us in your submission documents. Okay, I think I've answered as many as I can right now. Boy, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I'm so happy that you are here. We're so happy you're interested in our competition, and we hope you all enter a case and teaching note by April 13th in 2026. We're very excited about what we might see in these cases about what's happening entrepreneurially in emerging markets. So I thank you again. This concludes our webinar, our first webinar for the Entrepreneurship in Emerging Markets case writing competition. Again, I am Sandy Draheim. I'm Case Publishing Manager at WDI Publishing. I wish you all the best of luck. Thank you.